Okay, let's get started. So, welcome to an episode of Digital Dialogues. My name is Ethan, and today I'm here with Head of Editorial in the Creator Hub at YouTube, Jessica Wang. Jessica, thank you so much for being here and taking the time to join us today. So, I just wanted to ask if you could describe your role as the Head of Editorial for YouTube and just kind of walk me through on what you do on a daily basis and I guess what are some of your tasks and responsibilities for the day?
Yeah, so if I had to kind of describe my role in a nutshell, it's about telling the story of the company, so in this case it's YouTube, to the rest of the world. And so some of that is telling people about our news and announcements. And so because of that, my team runs the blog. Some of it is communicating what's happening on a platform to YouTube creators, the people who upload on YouTube, right? And as part of that, my team has the Creator Hub. Part of it is also trying to think through how we can tell the stories about our products and our policies in the way that people consume content these days, which is through original video, right? Through the different social platforms. So that's kind of my job is we're telling our stories and we're trying to do it to all the different audiences of people who are really care about what's happening on YouTube and to do it in a way that feels organic to the way people like to consume content. And so day to day, I think that's what one thing I love about my job. It never feels the same. So one day it can be thinking through what is our strategy about announcing this new feature that's coming to our company. So one thing that we have is we recently announced was some of our AI tools. And so one of them is about from text, how can you create a song that in the style of like Charlie Puth, right? And so we actually had a product, an experiment called Dream Track, which did exactly that. So my job involved anything from working with different people across the company on how are we telling that story over text? Like, what does that blog post look like? How are we engaging with the people who would actually use these products? So we brought in creators, gave them demos, kind of let them review it. To how are we telling the broader story to like the rest of the world? And so because of that, someone on my team did an interview with the product lead behind it, talking about what they're excited about, things that we have to make sure we're keeping our eye on, right? There's a lot of like issues with AI, I think, and control and privacy and all of that kind of stuff that we are very focused on. So doing all of that, and we did that, I think, in a kind of a long form video that we put on one of our, what we call owned and operated channels. So those are basically, could be video channels on YouTube. It could be a website, but the kind of media sites that we control as a company. So yeah, in a day, that's kind of what it's like. To even right now, today, Coachella is coming up, and our executives are going to be there. Sometimes when they have a chance, our executives love to engage with creators. Sometimes film what we call collabs, right? Videos. So part of it is thinking through what creators are going to be there, which ones might be fun for one of our execs to film with. That kind of thing. So it's kind of across the board.
And then I guess this is more of a personal question, but I heard you studied biochem at Harvard and was just kind of wondering what got you into working in the entertainment industry and tech, or more specifically, the digital media realm. I know this is like a complete 180 on your career, and I was just kind of wondering how you entered that space, and has digital media always been something that you've been interested in, and when did that start to look like a career opportunity for you?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, you could ask my mom, but she is still holding out hope that I will return to my science roots, as she likes to call it. But yeah, so basically, science was always something that I thought was interesting, cool. I loved chemistry in high school. So, and also coming from, Silicon Valley, as you know, the people around us, it was a lot of engineers, right? It was a lot of people in tech. And so that was kind of mostly what I knew. But also in high school, I loved writing. I was on the school newspaper. And so I just viewed it as an extracurricular. So in college, I was like, oh, I'm going to keep going with the science thing because it's something I knew. But I think what I realized at a certain point is I love the stories of science and not necessarily all the nitty gritty of working in a lab, doing
Yeah.
experiments and things like that. And so it was pretty late, I have to say. I think it was actually maybe the summer of my junior year when I was like, what am I going to do next? And, I think a lot of my biochem classmates were thinking about med school and, or even grad school in sciences. It was something that I was like, I don't know that that's really where I'm getting the most satisfaction from what I'm doing. And so I had to kind of take a step back and think, like, where am I getting the most joy in the way I'm spending my time at college, right? And I was still working at the college newspaper. It was the weekly, the Harvard Independent. And that was where I was actually finding the most fulfillment and just satisfaction. And so it was one of these eureka moments where, like, oh, people actually do this as a career, right? There were not that many people from the Bay Area who were becoming journalists. So it just didn't occur to me. But then at that moment, I was like, well, I could give it a try. And so I did a couple of newspaper internships and found my way to New York, started working in broadcast journalism. And then at a certain point, kind of felt like broadcast journalism, it's very rigid back then. It's very much your, like, evening news, or your, back then it was like 2020, kind of your news magazine shows, or 60 Minutes. It just felt like that kind of storytelling was a little bit stuck. And then digital media started happening. Felt like there were new ways of telling stories, democratized, right? Who could be doing these films, right? Like you see with your brothers. Anyone could pick up a camera and just do amazing films. And so I started to work, make the pivot toward digital media. And then I moved back to the Bay Area. So I was in New York all those years. And then I moved back to the Bay Area and worked in a couple more digital media outlets. And then really thought to myself, what platform is supporting the kind of storytelling that I really want to invest in? And YouTube was that platform. And it's a platform that not only there's a kind of, I really love long form storytelling. You get that kind of content on YouTube, but it's sustainable. People can actually make money and build businesses. Like, look at Mr. Beast now, right? He's built a massive business based upon YouTube. And so it was kind of a dream job. And so, yeah, I've been here 5 years now.
That's amazing. I was just kind of wondering if any of your skills really transferred from your studies at Harvard, and if so, which ones, but totally understand if none of them did.
No, I mean, once I basically fulfilled my science credits for my degree, I took a bunch of English and literature and kind of cultural studies classes. And I would say a lot of that, just learning how to, some anthropology. It's more about, a lot of the writing, of course, extends into what I'm doing now. Studying like great authors and how they develop voice and style was very transferable to what I'm doing now. And I think just gaining an understanding of how to be curious about the world, that's the most fundamentally important thing I would say in journalism. Is, I mean, I joke about it, but sometimes you get to be professionally nosy, right? There's something that's really interesting to you, and you can just throw yourself into that topic and learn everything about it, talk to people in the space, do a story about it, and really kind of quench that interest of learning something new. And so I think a lot of that stuff transferred for sure.
That's great. I also saw that you're considered a coach and mentor for DEI and host company-wide programs. How's the time commitment, and do you find it difficult to kind of juggle all your responsibilities and projects along with that?
Yeah, I mean, part of it is, I think that the more variety in the type of people who work at a company, the stronger the company. It's the kind of, I want to work with a lot of different perspectives, and I think that that's really crucial to having an inclusive environment. And so a lot of what I do is, do a lot of mentorship programs. I participate in a lot of the larger kind of, they call it ERG, it's Employee Resource Group. It is a lot of the kind of Latins Plus, Black Plus, Asians Plus, those kind of groups. Kind of see how I can amplify their stories with what my team does. So just through our storytelling, through our, like I mentioned, our owned and operated channels, we tell those stories to try to kind of show a little bit of the culture we're trying to build. I think, sure, sometimes my schedule gets squeezed, but it's something I can't imagine not doing, because it's part of what makes up the culture of a place. And if we didn't have that, then I just think it wouldn't be as satisfying place to work. And
Yeah.
so I think as long as you just kind of like, how can I be giving back more? I think that way it never feels like it's just something I'm jamming in, you know?
Yeah, that makes sense. I guess just to branch off DEI, are there any examples of brand strategies that you particularly use to reach diverse audiences with various backgrounds for content?
I think that one thing I've learned is to go to the communities themselves and really hear from them what is useful, right? Everyone has their own perspectives, and to kind of be like, well, I think this is right. But then you realize that you're not actually helping move forward what different communities actually need. So I even remember for a lot of our heritage months, right? So there's Asians
Yeah.
um, month, there's like Pride month. What we'll do is we'll go to a lot of the leads or sometimes creators in the community and kind of say, how can we be helping to lift you up?
Mhm.
And sometimes they're like, oh, we actually want people to tell the story of, like, so for example, AAPI creators, right? That YouTube was actually a place where a lot of Asians could see themselves in an entertainment space back when Hollywood was still like blocking them out, right? And so it was like very early on, like Wang Fu Productions,
Hmm.
like um, Ryan Higa, like a
Right.
lot of those people, they were the ones kind of showing, oh, right, that is actually something that we can consider, right? And then
Yeah.
they paved the way. I actually reached out to like Wang Fu and Philip Wang. It's like,
Hmm.
what would be helpful? And he was like, hey, I love to kind of do a little bit of here's what we came up with, but also here's how things are different now, and here's what we still need to work on, right? Or when there was the keeping that just open dialogue, there was another creator, Stephen Lim, who is part of
Oh,
this
yes. Yeah.
company called Watcher, and so he and his wife actually they're very involved in kind of Stop Asian Hate, and they had a whole campaign around it. It was being in contact with him, saying like, how can we help? What can we do? It was he gave space for Eugene, who was part of the Try Guys, to do an op-ed about how he was feeling during this time. A lot of it is just having those relationships with the community and just sourcing from them what we can do to support.
Got it. That's great. Going directly to the source and actually asking the community themselves how they could feel represented.
Right. I know but I'm always sensitive to tokenization, and so there's that feeling of, oh, once you come around once a year when it's my heritage month, right?
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
like keeping those relationships going, so it doesn't just feel like for this one month we want to show up
Mm.
as a brand. It's a continuous conversation.
And I'm sure it's essential to stay up to date with the latest trends and technologies while working at YouTube. How do you kind of tackle connecting with Gen Z? And I guess where do you source that information from to learn more about their particular age group?
Yeah, for sure. I know. We'll also be aware that Gen Alpha is now
Yes.
like
Yeah.
emerging, right? I mean, honestly, first and foremost, I watch a lot of content that is not my normal cup of tea, right? So if I was just to watch my kind of style, it would be maybe explainers, like documentary type videos, etc. But that's not reflective of what everyone else is watching. So basically, I have a habit, and my husband, you can talk to Alex about this because he's like, "What are you watching?" I watch all the things that are really hitting with like the cultural zeitgeist. So like, yeah, I'm watching every Mr. Beast video. I'm watching like who is that up and coming beauty creator who everyone is watching. Like I spend time on social, right, just to kind of see. And we do have like industry research and reports that go around, but honestly, I find that yeah, just like consuming consuming content is the number one way of staying in touch, because you'll be watching something, and let's say there's this Korean named Brittany Broski. She'll be referencing something, and even like a music artist. I'm like, oh, okay, well, I haven't heard of her. Check that person out. Then from that, you see that there's like a whole trend around whatever it may be at the moment. So it's kind of messy and it's time consuming, but there's no fast track to staying in touch, right? Except
Yeah.
actually like being in it.
And then I guess for tracking KPIs, are there any particular tools that you and your team use? just to make sure you're hitting desired goals? And how do you kind of track your performance? I know KPIs are easy to track via social media and digitally just because there's analytics now. Um, but how do you go about tracking KPIs for events and things that you guys host and partnerships like that?
Yeah, that's a good question. For events, generally there are kind of surveys and stuff that people can have people fill out afterwards, satisfaction, etc. There's longitudinal tracking among like key stakeholders, for example, like creators about how they're feeling about YouTube, etc. But I would say it's like more specifically, like let's say there's a launch and we want to know how it landed. It depends on the goals. I'm part of the communications team. Some of it is how much press coverage did you get, right? That's more of my PR colleagues. For our side, it is tracking, right, how much viewer reader engagement, let's say, we got on a blog post. And all of these are through analytics through your site. There's also the did we scale this successfully, right? So the content pieces that you produce around a news event, what's the average view duration, right? How many views, things like that. Is the sentiment positive or negative? There's that, and that's across social too. Those are a lot of the ways that we measure. But I will say that for the kind of communications is softer than product, softer science. So some of the stuff is just there is a strong, I would say, influence game where some of the work we do is try to humanize YouTube. We'll see how are the top creators talking about YouTube in social in their comment, right? Because there's a whole halo effect from how the most influential creators feel. So a lot of it's paying attention to that kind of thing. There's hard data, but there is also sometimes soft data. Like I'll give you an example where for Twitch, they were really struggling with their creator perception about whether or not Twitch was actually listening to creators and their needs and what they wanted to be able to build a business on Twitch. So their CEO, Dan Clancy, went on this like cross country like van tour and he like streamed with a whole bunch of creators. So you see a lot more dialogue now about like, oh, he's somebody who's really trying to hear the creator perspective, and you hear that from some influential creators, and then that narrative kind of gets built, right? So that's an example for another company, but that's a lot of the kind of stuff that we try to do here too. Is we try to think through what are some of the key verticals that are really influencing the platform. Like gaming is a big one, right? Like how do we engage with kind of key creators in that space? How do we then scale out what that is, our influence through social. We also, similar to Dan Clancy, we've done a lot of our own creator engagements as well.
And then I know you kind of touched on this earlier, how important, diversity is in the workplace. When building your multimedia content team, I guess what are the most valuable skills and characteristics that you look for in potential members to be a part of your crew? And as a leader yourself, like what do you believe it takes to lead a team and make someone qualified to do so?
Yeah, I think first and foremost, so at Google, we talk about there's a what of what you do and there's a how. And so the what is pretty obvious. It's, what are you actually accomplishing? Like, what's the impact of the work? But the how is just important. And that's how do you accomplish what you're doing? Are you being collaborative? Are you being inclusive? Are you somebody that people really want to work with? Or are you somebody that people are like, I guess I have to work with this person on this project, but I prefer not to, right? And so when I'm building a team, I think I'm looking for people who are passionate about not just like the specific skills of the job, but also about YouTube, right? That's something I always ask is like, who are some of your favorite creators to get a sense of like, are they actually passionate about YouTube? But also hearing a lot about how they work together with colleagues. That's also really important because that's how you really want people who see everything through an inclusive lens, right? So I remember one of my team members, one of her big things that she flagged when she started not this job but a previous job was that they could do a better job of finding different experts to come in. Like instead of just having white male experts, right?
Mm-hmm.
Let's make sure that we're tapping into like all the other wonderful experts that are available to us, right? Seeing if people already have that value system in place is really important. And then In terms of, what makes a leader, I would say it's somebody who really starts from a place of, I think, empathy. Because I think that what I find is you have to have a very personalized approach to every single person that you manage. Like there's a personal way that I like of being managed, but that's not going to work for all the different members of my team, right? I need to find out from them what are the kind of best ways to work with them to manage them. So I think if you don't have the empathy that everybody is kind of coming from a different place, has different needs, has maybe different sensitivities, it's going to be hard to manage and lead effectively. And the other things I've kind of just learned is there is a lot of making sure that you're very clear about how you view like the long-term vision of the team, right? That's something where coming from the journalism world, you get very used to, okay, I'm finishing the story, then on to the next, right? It's
Yeah.
very almost reactive. When you work at a place like YouTube, which has huge global scale, you just have to have much more long-term thinking and strategy, and you really have to make sure your team understands that, because that's going to help them make all the right decisions of what to prioritize. That's something that is definitely something I've learned since being in this role is you have to talk about strategy a lot more than you think. You think at first I was like, okay, I'll lay out strategy and that's it. But no, it's like constantly evolving. You have to keep talking with your team about it, keep checking in about it, right? That's something that I feel like as a leader is pretty key.
Makes sense. I guess for a large company like YouTube, where it's seen as many as the top online streaming or video streaming company, what kind of competitors really exist for them, and what are some ways and what kind of digital tools or platforms do you guys use to stay on top of competitors and identify them and just kind of keep up to date with who you guys are competing with?
Yeah, I mean, it's really interesting. I think anybody in tech will say competition is actually really good because it forces people to innovate, right? I think what's interesting is YouTube actually, it's not just a video platform, it's now like a streaming player. So Nielsen actually put out numbers that YouTube has been in the US, the leading streamer in terms of watch time on
Mm-hmm.
TV. I know I think everyone thinks of YouTube as like people watch on their phone or maybe on the computer, but yeah, it's people watching the TV is the fastest growing screen right now for us. And so ultimately it's about how people are spending their time. So you think about that, that's anything from like the Netflixes of the world to TikTok and to Instagram, right? Like it's all the things that people are engaging with content on, right? And so I mean people here like use they're on all the platforms. They are kind of consumers themselves. It's a matter of just testing it out and like what's it like to use the tools to make a reel or like a TikTok, right? And so yeah, it's there's no secret kind of like industry ways of keeping track of competitors. I think it's a lot of just like keeping aware of what everyone's doing and just and keeping focused on making sure that we are like building products in the ways that like our creators need, basically. So
Okay.
there's so much kind of feedback that we solicit from creators about like what tools and stuff they're looking for.
I guess just looking ahead, and what kind of emerging trends or technologies in the digital media landscape do you anticipate in having the biggest impact, and how do you think that'll like really change the landscape of marketing communications? Do you see a lot of change already happening with the introduction of I know you talked about it earlier, but the AI music generator, Dream Track, and artists such as Charlie Puth, Demi Lovato, John Legend, they all agreed to collab on this project with their voices mimics. I guess moving forward, what do you yourself kind of envision the impact of AI and how it will kind of impact the company itself?
Yeah, so in terms of like larger trends, I would say it is a lot of it's even just a further continuation of what we were talking about earlier of the democratization of media, which is that casual creation and kind of the blurring the lines between being a creator and being a fan, those things are only going to continue to accelerate in that. I mean, now people across all generations are picking up their phone and making short form content. So that's just going to like change the amount of just voices out there. So that's going to be really interesting, right? I was actually watching the other day, one creator who's really been growing really quickly is this kind of like a gaming grandpa who he's like started playing Fortnite and he streams and he's been growing really quickly and he's funny and like just changing this the mentality of who you think of as like an entertainer, I think is going to continue to shift. In terms of AI, it's interesting. All the generative AI stuff is I think really interesting. It's kind of thing that I think people think about when they think about AI. But what we've also found is that there's so many just day to day help with video creation that AI really can help with. So anything from creative ideation, like I want to do a video about hot dogs. What are some video ideas, right? So helping to ideate, creators use AI to help like put together outline scripts, right? Like even taking first cuts of edits, how to clip like short form footage videos out of long form content to like thumbnails and translation. So like there's cool stuff happening like dream track and those kind of things, but probably the most powerful is the stuff that's really helping day to day, like where a creator maybe felt like, oh, I need $30,000 more to do all this translation. They can now do it, like, and it takes very quickly, right?
Yeah.
That's the kind of thing that we're already seeing, and people aren't talking as much, but is is having a huge impact.
Yeah. I mean, like this platform, for example, is already doing that for me. It's has an AI option where it'll just kind of analyze your entire video and kind of make its own edits, and then it
Totally. Yeah.
saves me a lot of time. So
Back in the day, I used to have to like do transcripts myself, just like, oh my God, hours. You're just like
oh
writing it down.
yeah,
Um, to even like logging tape. Like now, like AI can also do that for you. It can like log tapes, like footage. So yeah, it's wild.
I guess just what some advice can you give someone or provide to those who want to become digital marketers or involved with the digital media landscape, and I guess from your personal experience of being in the field for some time, if there's any advice you could provide for those early professionals.
Yeah. I would say make content yourself. Like try it out because I feel like having an understanding of what works, what doesn't, all the different skills that go into telling a successful story. If it's for a brand, if it's not, that's the kind of stuff that's hard to teach. I feel like part of what makes me effective is my years of journalism of just sorting out how to tell the story in a really clean way, knowing how to film, knowing how to edit, having all of the just the context for how to create the content that tells the marketing story. That's so important and like is like honestly like kind of the best education. And that's to that point, I mean, people like learning how to build their own brand. It's a pretty great education, right? Because you're figuring out like, okay, well, maybe my story is best told on LinkedIn. Actually, maybe I have some really interesting takes that's more of an X Twitter, or
Mm-hmm.
maybe like IG Reels where I can really take off, right? Like that helps you also figure out like what are the right approaches for different companies.
Thank you so much, Jessica.
Sure.
Making the time, taking the time to help me with this project and joining me today. And
Oh, not
really
at all. Yeah,
appreciate
yeah.
talking to you and learning a lot more about what you do at YouTube, and I guess your just personal perspective about the entire landscape. So really appreciate it.
Yeah, for sure. Anytime. Let me know how I can help.